The studio lights cast a cold blue glow across the stage, giving everything a surreal, almost frozen quality. The audience was silent, waiting for the cameras to roll. Producers moved with quiet urgency, whispering commands through headsets. It wasn't just another political debate. It felt like something bigger was about to unfold. At the center of the stage stood two podiums. On the left was Representative Adam Schiff, a seasoned lawmaker from California known for his fierce critiques of Donald Trump. On the right stood Karoline Leavitt, a rising conservative voice, young but sharp, with a reputation for fearless responses and viral moments. The tension between them was electric even before the first words were spoken. The host, Sarah Mitchell, gave the countdown. "We're live in 5, 4, 3. The red light blinked on. America was watching. Adam Schiff leaned forward slightly, adjusting his tie. His expression was firm, voice steady. "America stands at a dangerous crossroads," he began, his words slicing through the silence like a knife. "We face a moment where we must choose between the truth and the toxic legacy of Trumpira extremism." He turned to face Karoline, eyes locked on her. "Ms. Leavitt, you represent more than just political opposition. You represent a dangerous continuation of lies and fear. And tonight, I won't let that go unchallenged." The audience murmured. Karoline didn't flinch. She didn't blink. Schiff continued, his tone sharper now. "You support a man who questioned election results, who spread misinformation, who encouraged division. You champion policies that tear families apart, defund education, and undermine our intelligence agencies. What do you say to the millions of Americans who fear that your politics could destroy democracy itself?" A long pause followed. Karoline's fingers brushed lightly against the microphone. She looked at Schiff, then turned to the camera. Her expression was calm, almost unreadable. Then she spoke. "With all due respect, Congressman Schiff," she said, her voice clear and controlled, "you don't get to lecture America about democracy." The crowd stirred. Her tone was steady but laced with something sharper beneath the surface. "You talk about fear and lies, yet you are the face of years-long investigations built on accusations you never proved. You speak of division, but you pushed narratives that turned neighbor against neighbor." Schiff opened his mouth, but she raised a hand slightly politely, yet firmly, to continue. "You speak of tearing families apart," she said. "But where was your voice when lockdowns kept children from classrooms? When small businesses collapsed under policies you defended? When violent crimes soared and cities burned?" There was a shift in the room. A few audience members gasped. Others leaned forward. Sarah Mitchell blinked, clearly unprepared for the shift in energy. The camera zoomed in slightly, catching Schiff's jaw tighten. Karoline glanced at him, then back at the camera. "I came here to debate policies, not trade insults. But if you want to talk about truth, then let's talk about your record. Let's talk about surveillance abuses, leaked intelligence, and classified briefings you twisted into headlines." That did it. Schiff's face reddened, and he quickly reached for the microphone. "Those are dangerous claims. They're public record," Karoline cut in. Her tone never rose. That was what made it more powerful. "You spent years in front of cameras insisting you had evidence of collusion. Where is it, Congressman? Where's the smoking gun you promised?" Silence followed, then whispers. Then one person in the audience clapped. Then another. The sound built slowly, uncertainly, like a ripple turning into a wave. Schiff tried to recover. "Ms. Leavitt is twisting the truth." "No," she said quietly. "I'm just not afraid of it." The camera held on her face, young, focused, unshaken. Behind the scenes, a technician leaned toward a producer. "We're trending already," he whispered. "Clips are blowing up on X. Hashtag Karoline flips the script." The control room buzzed. editors began marking timestamps for viral moments. The studio felt like it was holding its breath. Sarah Mitchell, trying to regain control, asked the next question, but the moment had already shifted. The usual rules no longer applied. What started as a debate had become something else entirely. Karoline Leavitt had not only survived the first strike, she had flipped the stage on its head. And somewhere behind the cameras, someone was already scrambling. It's because when she spoke next, she wasn't just going to respond. She was going to reveal something none of them saw coming. And the real chaos hadn't even started yet. The next question came from Sarah Mitchell. But neither Adam Schiff nor Karoline Leavitt was truly listening. The air in the CNN studio was different, now charged, unpredictable. Schiff had entered the night expecting to dominate, to tear into Karoline with years of experience and a practiced tongue. But she had dismantled his opening like it was a cheap campaign flyer. The cameras cut between the two of them, both figures standing in a strange silence. Schiff looked tense, eyes narrowed. Karoline stood perfectly still, her hands folded calmly on the podium. Mitchell repeated her question. Ms. Leavitt, in recent interviews, you've supported what some critics call isolationist foreign policy. Given the rising tensions in Eastern Europe and the Pacific, where do you stand on America's role in global conflict? Karoline didn't answer right away. She let the pause stretch out just long enough to make everyone lean in. Then she spoke, her voice low but clear. I believe in peace through strength, not peace through endless wars. It wasn't a new line, but the way she said it made it feel like a direct challenge not to Schiff, but to the entire political class watching from home. She continued, for decades, we've sent American troops to fight battles that Congress barely debated. In countries most people couldn't find on a map, we've lost thousands of lives. We've spent trillions of dollars. And what did we get? Did it stop terrorism? Did it make us safer? Or did it just enrich contractors and weaken our people? There was a murmur in the audience. Even Schiff seemed unsure how to respond. And while we were busy playing world police, she said our own border was being overrun. Our cities descended into crime. Our allies questioned our leadership. And our enemies watched us exhaust ourselves. She turned slightly toward Schiff. And what did you do, Congressman? You approved every budget increase? Every drone strike? You sat on the Intelligence Committee while cyber attacks went unchecked. China grew stronger. Russia got bolder. You let it happen. Schiff fired back almost immediately. That's an insult to the men and women who serve this country. What you're proposing is a retreat and abdication of responsibility. If we don't lead the world, authoritarian regimes will. Karoline nodded, not blinking. And if we keep stretching ourselves thin, we'll collapse, just like every empire before us. The tension crackled like electricity. In the control room, a producer turned to the director. This isn't just a debate anymore, it's a takedown. And she's setting him up for something big. Schiff tried to shift the focus. You're avoiding the truth. You stand on this stage defending someone who once called fallen soldiers losers, who praised dictators, who tried to overturn an election. He looked straight into the camera. This isn't just policy, it's character. The man you defend is a danger to democracy. Karoline tilted her head slightly. She seemed almost amused. You want to talk about character? Let's talk about yours. The room went still. She continued, you reclassified material, then gave statements to the press that created chaos in the stock market. You said you had proof of foreign collusion, but you never released it. Why? Because it never existed. The audience shifted. Even Sarah Mitchell looked uncomfortable. You've built a career on fear, Karoline said. Fear of Trump, fear of Russia, fear of the right. But what have you actually built? What have you done for the people of California while there? Cities drown in crime and homelessness. Schiff tried to interrupt, but she didn't stop. Her words came faster, now measured, sharp, relentless. You lecture us about democracy, but you support censorship online. You cheered when journalists were banned for reporting stories you didn't like. You're not protecting democracy, Congressman. You're managing a narrative. That hit hard. The crowd broke into spontaneous applause, some cheers, some boos, but the noise was deafening. Schiff stepped back slightly, visibly rattled. Then came the twist. Karoline looked directly at Sarah Mitchell. Before we go any further, I'd like to address something off the record that's about to become very public. Mitchell hesitated. We're live, Ms. Leavitt. Karoline nodded. And the timing is perfect. She reached into her folder and pulled out a slim stack of papers. She held them up. These documents were declassified 2 weeks ago. They contain communications between a former intelligence officer and members of this very network CN, unregarding stories that were deliberately shaped, suppressed, or inflated during the 2020 and 2024 election cycles. One of those names, Ms. Mitchell, is yours. The studio went silent. Schiff's face paled. Mitchell looked frozen. I'm not just here to debate, Karoline said. I'm here to expose how deep this goes, and we're just getting started. The camera zoomed in, social media lit up, okay? And in that moment, America realized it wasn't watching a political debate anymore, okay? It was watching a reckoning. The moment Karoline Leavitt held up those documents, the studio felt like it had stopped breathing. The air was thick. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether to gasp or cheer. Adam Schiff's face twitched, but he didn't speak. Sarah Mitchell, for the first time that night, looked genuinely shaken. Karoline didn't flinch. She laid the documents carefully on the podium, her fingers tracing the first page like she was counting her next move. This, she said clearly, is an internal email chain dated October 2020, just days before the last presidential election. In it, senior producers and legal counsel at CNN discuss how to handle certain leads tied to Hunter Biden. Chinese energy firms and classified intelligence briefings that were never supposed to leave government servers. She looked at Schiff, then at Mitchell, and yet they did. Someone coughed in the back of the room. A camera operator cursed under his breath. No one dared to interrupt her now. The email clearly mentions a source codenamed Atlas, who reportedly leaked narrative guidance to your newsroom in exchange for pre-election coordination with federal contacts. Karoline continued, and Congressman Schiff. Your name appears as a trusted intermediary. Schiff took a slow breath. This is a stunt. Nothing you've said proves anything. You're waving papers around that haven't been verified. You're feeding conspiracy theories to confuse the public. Karoline kept her eyes locked on him. If they're fake, then why is CNN's legal team already filing injunctions to block their publication? The room exploded. People began shouting. Some stood, demanding the cameras be turned off. Studio staff exchanged panicked glances, uncertain if the show should cut to commercial. But Sarah Mitchell knew cutting away now would look like guilt. She forced herself to remain still and turned back to Karoline. Do you have proof of this injunction? Mitchell asked, voice tight. Karoline reached into the folder again and pulled out a folded letter. This is a cease desist from CNN's general counsel dated 3 days ago. It warns my team not to distribute the documents or reference their contents on air. They cite national security risks, which is ironic since the real risk is the truth getting out. For once, Schiff didn't interrupt. Karoline's voice lowered slightly. I'm not here to smear anyone. I'm here to reveal that for years, powerful media institutions worked hand in hand with federal insiders to control what Americans were allowed to know, what they were allowed to believe, and who they were allowed to vote for. There was a sharp sound, the sound of someone slapping a desk backstage. A producer whispered urgently into their headset. Meanwhile, Schiff tried to regain control. You're accusing an entire network, federal officials, and elected members of Congress of treason. That's a dangerous, reckless path. Karoline raised an eyebrow. I'm not accusing, I'm exposing. There's a difference. Then she pivoted smartly. You know, Congressman, she said, you speak often of preserving democracy. But real democracy dies when people are lied to by the very institutions they trust. When truth becomes something managed behind boardroom doors. She looked. To the audience, some of you may love Trump. Some of you may hate him. That's not the point. The point is, you were manipulated. And it didn't just stop in 2020. It continued into 2024. With Ukraine, with COVID origins, with AI surveillance, and many of the same names, yours included, kept showing up. Schiff stepped forward. You're creating paranoia. We have oversight. We have laws. Karoline responded instantly. We also had the church committee, Congressman. Do you? Remember that? It exposed the CIA's abuses in the 1970s. America found out the intelligence. Community was spying on journalists, planting news, manipulating public perception. She paused. Sound familiar? The silence was deafening. Schiff didn't respond. He couldn't. The audience was no longer reacting like this was a campaign debate. It had shifted. This was deeper now, more dangerous. Then something unexpected happened. A man in the audience stood up and shouted, "She's right. I worked cybersecurity at Langley. We saw this coming. No one listened." Security moved to escort him out, but the damage was done. The dam had cracked. Social media was on fire. Hashtag Leavitt Files and hashtag Schiff exposed trended within seconds. Clips of Karoline holding the papers looped on phones in every corner of the country. And backstage, Sarah Mitchell's producer stared at a blinking message on his screen. A private Slack channel had just gone dark. Messages deleted. History wiped. Karoline, still calm, looked down at her notes. "There's more," she said, softly. "And next week I'll be sitting down with whistleblowers from 2 federal agencies. Names will be named." Schiff's face turned red. "You're playing with fire, Ms. Leavitt." She didn't blink. "So are you, Congressman?" But the difference is Zim, not the one who's going to get burned. Fade to black. The camera panned across the stunned studio. Lights glared hot, but the room felt ice cold. Adam Schiff stood silent, jaw tight, eyes fixed on Karoline Leavitt, who calmly returned his stare. Sarah Mitchell shuffled her papers, her voice slow and unsure as she tried to redirect the chaos. We're going to take a short break," she said into the microphone. But they didn't cut to commercial. The control room was frozen, and the switchboard hesitated. The show stayed live. Karoline leaned into her mic. "No need for a break. We're just getting started." 'Twas a direct challenge one. The audience felt in their bones. Across the nation, living rooms erupted in cheers, gears, and everything in between. The debate had stopped being a debate. It was a reckoning. Adam Schiff stepped forward slowly, visibly trying to steady himself. "What you're doing is reckless," he said, each word deliberate. "You're waving unverified material, pushing theories that endanger lives. I've been in intelligence briefings. You haven't? There's context you don't understand." Karoline didn't flinch. "Then enlighten me." "Because the American people are tired of being told you wouldn't understand. Tired of being spoken down to. Tired of a 2-tiered reality, one for the rest of us." There was a rustle from backstage. The CNN executives huddled with legal counsel. One of them was whispering frantically into a phone. Panic was brewing. Then Sarah Mitchell tried again. "Congressman Schiff, would you like to respond to the specific allegations regarding coordination with media during the 2020 election?" Schiff adjusted his tie and took a deep breath. "There is no evidence, credible or otherwise, that I was involved in any such coordination. I have always fought to protect the free press, not control it. These accusations are nothing more then a political performance. Karoline's voice cut through him. So you're saying the emails are fabricated? I'm saying they're unverified and likely manipulated. Karoline lifted her phone. It's funny, because your name shows up in internal Slack logs, calendar, meetings, and even text messages. One of them, from a CNN strategist, says, Adam says we'll have cover if this leaks. His committee's got our back. A wave of murmurs swept the studio. Schiff visibly paled. I've never seen that message, he snapped. You will, Karoline replied. So will the Oversight Committee. That's when everything changed. From the far side of the studio, a voice yelled, She's bluffing. It came from a woman in a gray pantsuit, part of CNN's legal team. She stood, hands shaking. Those materials were stolen, legally obtained. This isn't journalism, it's criminal. Karoline turned toward her. Thank you for confirming their authenticity. The room exploded again. Audience gasps, crew members swearing. One cameraman briefly losing his shot as he shook his head in disbelief. Sarah Mitchell raised her hand. Enough. This is a national broadcast. I need control in this studio. But no one was listening anymore. The story had escaped the building. On the screens across America, network after network began cutting into their programming. Fox News, News Nation, even BBC World was covering it now. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, Leavitt accuses Schiff, CNN, of election collusion evidence. Presented on live broadcast. Karoline turned back to Schiff. Congressman, I want to ask you one final question. Simple. Did you communicate with CNN or any other media outlet in 2020 regarding the suppression of stories tied to Hunter Biden? Chinese energy contracts or classified intel leaks? Schiff's mouth opened, then closed. I have no recollection of any such communication, he finally said, clearly rattled. Karoline held his gaze. That's not a no. In that moment, it was clear. Something had shifted. What started as a staged debate was now a live investigation, one that no one had expected. Schiff was sweating. CNN's lawyers were texting furiously. Sarah Mitchell's eyes were darting to the control booth, pleading silently for someone to intervene, but the camera never cut away. And then, like a final crack across a frozen lake, Karoline dropped the last blow. I'm releasing the full archive tomorrow. All 186 documents. The metadata, the emails, the transcripts, whistleblowers will speak. This ends now. Schiff took a step back, as if struck. The lights didn't dim, the mics didn't mute, but the entire studio felt darker, heavier, charged with something, electric and irreversible. Somewhere in the control room, a red button blinked. It was the emergency cutoff. But no one dared to press it. It was too late. Truth, or whatever it was, had already gone viral. And by morning, the world would be a different place.
Asterisk outside the CNN studio, the night had turned into chaos. Protesters, press vans, and floodlights jammed the narrow D.C. Avenue. Crowds held Sinsum praising Karoline Leavitt as a truth, others calling her a fraud. Police barricades held them apart as choppers circled overhead. News anchors broadcast live in every direction, grasping to explain what had just unfolded on it. Inside, Karoline stood at the edge of the stage, still composed but visibly watching every movement. Schiff had retreated off camera, escorted by his aide through a side corridor, pale and silent. Sarah Mitchell sat stunned in her chair, headphones dangling, whispering to someone in the control room who'd stopped responding 10 minutes ago. Producers tried to regain control, but the network had already lost its grip. The moment Karoline had announced the document dropped, something irreversible had been set in motion. Thousands of downloads had already occurred from a leak portal that her team quietly launched seconds before the statement. The files, emails, screenshots, voice memos were authentic, time-stamped, and traced back to both political staffers and media figures, and they were spreading fast. Telegram groups, X threads, and underground journalists were already dissecting them. A few of the emails mentioned editorial meetings between Schiff's staff and CNN executives. Others included discussion points forwarded before televised interviews, shaping narratives to match committee leaks. Karoline stood backstage, her phone lighting up every few seconds. She handed it to her chief of staff. Monitor it. If anyone touches the folder metadata, I want to know. And activate contingency file. 2 Hunters' laptop link goes live if they try to kill the story. Her aide nodded, grim. A CNN security guard approached nervously. Ms. Leavitt, they're asking if you'd be willing to leave out the back to avoid confrontation. Karoline smiled faintly. I'm not going out the back. I didn't walk into the fire to sneak out the exit. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, the fallout was already beginning. Senator Hawthorne, chair of the Congressional Oversight Sub, had just posted on X, emergency hearing being scheduled, documents under review. If verified, Schiff is finished. Moments later, Congressman Albright, a longtime Schiff, ally, tweeted a defensive response. The materials Leavitt showed tonight are misleading, selectively edited. This is a disinformation campaign led by foreign actors, but their denial came too late. Karoline's media team had already released an independent digital audit showing all files were unsigned with encrypted source hashes and verified through multiple forensic software suites. They'd learned from past smear campaigns. This time, they were ready. Back at the studio, Sarah Mitchell finally stood up. Her voice cracked as she tried to regain some authority. We are off the air, folks. We're cutting feeds. This debate is over. But Karoline turned to her. Calm and unwavering. Sarah, I think you misunderstood. This isn't a debate anymore. It's a reckoning. Sarah blinked, unsure how to respond. She looked at her producer. Kill the lights. But before they could, Karoline walked back to center stage. A single camera was still live, one that the network's servers no longer controlled. It was Karoline's independent, encrypted, streaming to over 10 million viewers through her channel. She raised her hand, then pointed to the lens. I want every American to ask themselves one thing. Why is truth always treated like a threat? Her voice was steady. Why are you told to fear whistleblowers, to hate those who question, to mock anyone who dares look behind the curtain? Tonight, you saw what happens when someone does, and I promise you it's only the beginning. Then she walked away. The screen cut to black. By morning, the president's press secretary was forced to address the scandal. The Department of Justice issued a statement about possible evidence tampering, but their words rang hollow. Other nations were reacting. To BBC aired a special report. Le Monde published a translated dump of key files, and the German press called it the American exposure. Schiff hadn't been seen in public since he left the studio. Rumors began to swirl about pending subpoenas, private jet flight logs, and encrypted messages deleted minutes before Karoline's release went live. And across the country, in homes and offices, Americans did what they hadn't done in years. They paid attention. Something was breaking. Not just trust in one politician or one network, but in a system that had convinced them truth was negotiable. Karoline Leavitt had made herself the face of that rupture. And no one, not even the most powerful, knew what would come next. The sun had barely risen over Washington, D.C., but the Capitol was already stirring. Satellite trucks crowded every corner, their antennas angled like missiles on every major news channel. Karoline Leavitt's name flashed across the screen in all caps. Unprecedented disclosure, media collusion exposed, whistleblower or opportunist, but none of that mattered now, not here. Karoline sat inside a black SUV, quietly reviewing documents with her legal team as they headed toward Capitol Hill. The Oversight Subcommittee had just issued a formal summons for her to testify, but this wasn't a trap. It was exactly what she wanted. She folded one paper and placed it in a red folder marked Phase 3. Then she looked out the tinted window. The Capitol loomed ahead like a fortress, its marble columns glinting under the morning light. What was once just symbolic was now a battlefield. Inside the committee chamber, the mood was electric. Senators from both parties filled the hearing room. Cameras were locked in place. Phones buzzed like insects. Some members whispered anxiously about what Karoline might reveal next. Others were already preparing counterattacks. At the center, Adam Schiff sat at the witness table, flanked by his legal counsel. He looked gaunt older than he had the night before. Aides handed him a bottle of water, but his hands shook when he raised it. Then Karoline entered. She wore a navy blue suit, minimal makeup, and no jewelry except a silver pin in the shape of the Constitution. Her expression was unreadable. No smugness, no fear. She sat down opposite Schiff, opened her folder, and waited. The chairwoman tapped her gavel. This emergency session of the House Oversight Subcommittee is now in order. Ms. Leavitt, you are here voluntarily, is that correct? Karoline nodded. That's correct. And you understand that anything you say here is under oath. I do, she said simply. Then the questions began. At first, they were predictable. Who provided the documents? When did she receive them? Had she tampered with anything? Karoline answered each one with precision, her voice clear and unemotional. I received the files through an encrypted drop from a protected source. The chain of custody has been preserved. All materials have been verified independently. Then she paused, pulled a second folder from her bag, and placed it on the table. This folder contains internal communications between members of Congressman Schiff's staff and senior executives at a major news network. These emails demonstrate deliberate coordination to control narratives before and after key hearings. During the impeachment proceedings, a gasp rippled through the chamber. Schiff's attorney stood up. Madam Chair, we request a halt to this testimony until authenticity is confirmed. But the chair shook her head. The documents are already in public circulation. They will be reviewed in full. Karoline continued in one email dated April 3rd. A Schiff aide outlines talking points and sends them to a lead producer hours before Congressman Schiff appears on their program. The subject line reads, "Keep it tight. No curveballs." Cameras flashed. Journalists texted feverishly. The chairwoman leaned forward. Ms. Leavitt, do you believe this constitutes a violation of ethical standards or possibly legal protocols? Karoline looked her dead in the eye. I believe the American people were lied to repeatedly and with intent. Schiff finally broke his silence. He leaned into the microphone, his voice hollow. This is a smear campaign orchestrated by radical actors. The so-called documents are cheery. You're all being manipulated. Karoline didn't even flinch. If that's true, Congressman, then you should welcome a forensic review. Let's subpoena every email servers, mine, CNN's. Let's do it together, in public. Schiff froze. For a moment, there was silence. Then murmurs spread across the room. The chair tapped her gavel again. Order! Order! Karoline turned toward the audience, her voice still calm. You may not like me. You may disagree with me, but what you've seen in the last 24 hours is not about politics. It's about power and how far people will go to keep it hidden. Her words lingered in the air. When the hearing ended, Karoline stepped out into the flash of cameras and shouted questions. She said nothing, just walked past them and into the SUV. Inside, her aide handed her a phone. You need to see this, he said. A news anchor on screen read from a breaking alert. The FBI confirms that a second set of documents has been leaked this time, linking media advisors from 2 networks to paid lobbying groups overseas. Karoline's eyes narrowed. Then, it's time for phase 4, she said. The storm had only just begun. The SUV cruised through the rain-soaked streets of D.C., passing news vans lined up like soldiers. Inside, Karoline Leavitt sat silently, staring at the red folder on her lap marked Phase 4. No one in the car dared speak. The city was no longer just watching her, it was trembling at what she might reveal next. 3 hours earlier, a second leak had rocked the political landscape. This time, emails and call logs tied lobbyists from foreign energy firms to senior producers at 2 of the largest television networks in America. The implications weren't just about spin. They pointed to international influence over domestic narratives, and Adam Schiff's name had appeared in the correspondence again. Back at the Capitol, an emergency closed-door briefing had been called by the Senate Intelligence Committee. Karoline had been asked to attend not as a witness, but as a security collaborator. The room was heavily guarded. Phones were confiscated at the entrance. Even longtime senators looked uneasy as they sat around the oval table. Senator Garrett Morales, a moderate Democrat known for his caution, was the first to speak. Ms. Leavitt, are you certain of the origin and authenticity of these latest files? Karoline nodded. Yes. They were verified through 2 independent labs and cross-checked against earlier metadata. Nothing has been altered. And if you look closely, she slid a copy across the table. You'll see timestamps that match Schiff's official hearing prep meetings. A few senators exchanged glances. The air was so tense it seemed to hum. Morales spoke again, slower this time. If what you're saying is true, then we are not just talking about media corruption or political deceit. We are looking at possible foreign interference within our own information infrastructure. Karoline said nothing. She didn't have to. Then Senator Alden Kane, a longtime ally of Schiff, snapped. This is a stunt. You've weaponized gossip and innuendo. You're taking isolated moments and turning them into conspiracy. Karoline didn't blink. She opened the folder again. Page 7, line 12. Ensure coverage of vote manipulation. Narrative aligns with Ukraine pipeline angle direct. From DG, who's DG Senator. Why does a European lobbying firm care what CNN airs before a vote on American energy sanctions? The room went cold. Even Kane fell silent. Then Morales leaned back and muttered, "My God." By nightfall, the story had broken wide open. International outlets picked up the leaks. European diplomats issued vague denials. Meanwhile, the FBI, under mounting pressure, confirmed the start of a counterintelligence probe. Adam Schiff, who just days earlier had stood as the commanding voice in the debate, was now avoiding cameras. His office issued a one-line statement. These are politically motivated leaks timed for maximum chaos. But it was too late. Karoline was already booked for a live prime interview with Sarah Micha, the same journalist who had moderated the original debate. Inside the studio, everything was different now. The crew was nervous. Producers whispered behind their clipboards. Even Mitchell seemed uncharacteristically tense. Karoline walked on set wearing the same navy blue suit. She sat across from Sarah under the same lights that had once spotlighted Schiff's dramatic opening, Michir Begum, Mizudia Bit. Just a week ago, you were dismissed as an opportunist trying to make a name. Tonight, you sit at the center of what may be the most damaging political scandal in years. How does it feel? Karoline smiled faintly. It feels like someone finally opened a window in a room that's been locked for years. The first half of the interview was calm to calm. Mitchell was measured, polite, even supportive, but then came the pivot. Critics say you're playing a dangerous game, that your crusade may destabilize institutions we rely on. Do you ever wonder if you've gone too far? Karoline didn't hesitate. If institutions collapse under the weight of truth, then they weren't strong to begin with. I didn't break them, I exposed them. Mitchell tried again. Are you saying Adam Schiff knowingly worked with foreign influencers? I'm saying the evidence points that way. And if he wants to clear his name, he should welcome a full investigation. A producer off camera motioned for Mitchell to cut to commercial, but she waved it off. One last question, Mitchell said, her voice low. There are rumors of a third. Drop something more explosive. Will you confirm it exists? Karoline leaned forward, her voice a whisper picked up by millions. All I'll say is, some names haven't been mentioned yet, but they will be. The camera zoomed in. The screen faded to black dot. And just like that, the chaos that Adam Schiff had tried to control had turned on him completely. The truth was no longer in a folder, it was a fire. And Karoline Leavitt had just poured gasoline on it